first crops with that material. First couple of years, no big deal, but last couple of weeks ago, he dug one up. We had to move it. The soil was so rich. It was beautiful, like black, bunches of bugs and stuff.
It's a whole different topic
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, it works good for us for two reasons. It's easy to handle because it's a fire, and the bunnies don't get in.
Hey there, folks.
Yeah.
Just getting started here, so while y'all are tuning in, I'm gonna get set up here. Feel free to chime in the comments section if you have any questions. I do have 4 of us up here joining live, so I'm going to be talking off camera. I set up in the shed even though it's beautiful out, just in case we got hit by any of those showers that were in the forecast. So it looks like we didn't get much more than a little spit of rain up here at the Foothill Garden. So.
chicken wire fence all the way around the garden.
Wow, that's nice. Yeah.
Before it's built.
Yeah.
So lucky, yeah.
That's like I'm going downhill and I'm in a hole. I didn't want you to get knocked over, see? Thank you.
We had on roads last night or not, but yesterday we were picking tomatoes.
Yeah, we picked our last tomatoes. I got
Yeah.
a rock pile.
Yeah.
Yeah, we got that little kind of scare,
Yeah.
but I don't know, everything turned out. It seems like only the outer valleys actually got frosted, and even a bunch of, my folks are down in Gardnerville, and they lost a couple in funny spots, but most of it survived. So, yeah, now we've had pretty nice finishing weather, so.
Yeah.
For well, then at 5,200 feet, for sure we're good.
Nice, that's excellent. Yeah, and we're almost right at 5,000 feet here. So we're a few hundred feet above, downtown and by the airport or the high school in Carson City. And for that reason, we stay a couple degrees warmer. We're kind of sheltered up here, so it's actually nice. So looks like we have a couple folks tuning in online. So, now that we've got folks in person, I do kind of like to do a quick introduction. I doubt that we'll be able to hear over here. We're not really set up for that, but you just want to introduce yourself. Tell me where you just told me you're Wellington 5200, but like how big your garden is and if you've grown garlic before, I guess.
Well, I've tried. This is Chris Smith. I'm here in Smith. I've tried to grow garlic, but my bulbs, my shallots, and my garlics, they ended up so tiny. It's
Okay.
like, I'm not big.
Small bulbs. Okay, cool. Cool.
And we have probably, 12, 13 raised beds or 4 by 8.
Yeah, the garden area is about 30 by 30.
Oh, great. Okay, so that's a pretty big garden. You got some space to play around with.
Yeah.
All raised beds.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's great for the garlic. So.
Yeah.
I'm Bianca. We live in Riverview by the Carson River on this side, so we're a little bit colder than here. We've got 6 horse troughs, galvanized horse troughs. I kind of want to, just do container, maybe small container if possible. I don't know how hardy they're going to be out in the garden. They're on just a half acre.
Yep.
It does get cold over there. And we just finished tomatoes, tried okra, not that
Okay.
great. I tried some onions from corns, some red onions, in just a little area, and that wasn't too great. So I'm wanting to kind of designate a pot.
Okay, sure. Yeah, and the onions are one I need to do more homework on. Haven't really gotten into growing too successfully, but haven't tried too much because there's 2 types. There's day length sensitive and then day length neutral. And we're right on the edge where I think you can do both. And it's basically the difference of planting in spring, harvesting in fall, or just like with the garlic, fall or late season planting for a spring or early summer harvest. And we're right on the edge because of our latitude. We can do either, and I've heard from lots of people that they have success with onions, but they don't know which type they're growing. But typically they're doing it full season, growing spring through fall. So that's one to experiment with for sure. Say again.
They grow a lot of onions out in the area.
Yeah, yeah,
Valley,
yeah, definitely. We're definitely not a bad climate for it. You know, garlic's super successful. Shallots can do well. So a lot of the tubers, we can have success with a lot of those root crops out here. So, and for those of you that may not be aware, we're in Carson City, Nevada, and so I mentioned this site is right about 5,000 foot. So we're just going around a little circle, quick introductions, whether folks have grown garlic or not before. So.
My name's Peggy Nagley. I live out in Dayton. I have 6 raised beds, anywhere from 10 by 2s to 20 by 12.
Oh, cool.
I haven't grown garlic in many years, not since I moved here. So next year I'm hoping to start again.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. And sorry, where'd you move from?
The Bay Area.
Okay, gotcha. Probably easier to grow garlic here. You know, one of the challenges is, and we'll talk about it in some detail, is you dry off your garlic and cut the water to it at the end of harvest. That's part of affects not only the swelling and size of your bulbs, but also the storage life of the garlic. As you dry down and as the leaves dry, they add layers of paper to the bulb.
Kind of like the tulips and the artists and stuff.
I don't know enough about flower bulbs, but maybe if you dry them down prior to bulbs, and that's something that I don't think is uncommon with certain bulbs and things like that. So, and sorry, I don't mean to skip you, Ellie. You can introduce yourself as well.
I just started working here as an AmeriCorps member, but I've never grown with garlic,
Yeah, definitely. So, all right. So we just did a quick little spin. It seems like most of the folks that are here have tried a bit in the past. As far as growing it seems almost everybody is in raised beds, and we do have some container growing desire, which is great because garlic can do well in containers. One of the main things that's important is it does prefer kind of a sandy loam soil, which over here closer to the mountains we often don't have. You do get some sandy spots, it depends where you're at, but we often have some clay dominant soils. So drainage is really important. That's why raised beds are great. And doing some kind of loosening of the soil prior is excellent, so that you're planting into something kind of loose and with good drainage, good aeration. I am an advocate of no-till. So for me, something like that would be using a no-till tool called a broad fork. It's like a big 2-handled pitchfork. You hop on it, drive it down. I think the tines are 8 or 10 inches long. You drive them down in the soil and pry the soil open. And so it opens and allows air, water, oxygen, air and oxygen, opens all of that up for the soil, but doesn't turn it over. It doesn't flip the soil horizon, and the big part about that is it's not destroying your microbiology. So it's not destroying all the fungi and bacteria that have set up, and particularly some of the fungi are of critical importance to the garlic, especially if you want to start shying away from fertilizers. Although it definitely, to get good big bulbs, you're gonna want to fertilize with like a phosphorus specific, high phosphorus fertilizer. So bone meal is really common. If you're looking for vegan or animal-free alternatives, fish bone meal is closer, but then you've got straight rock phosphate. So it's a mined product. It's not necessarily the most sustainable, but those are the options we have. Otherwise, if you're interested in making your own fertilizer for garlic, and I'll mention this again, there's a Korean natural farming preparation that's pretty easy to look up, and you can do a DIY they call it water-soluble phosphorus, and it's made from charring bones, and then eventually you extract the phosphorus and get it in a plant-available form using vinegar, and then you dilute that and would apply that to the plants. So kind of an involved process, but not beyond the realm of some backyard barbecuers and things like that. So, if that's the soil preference and main fertilizer need, but garlic will grow in any soil, assuming it's well drained. As long as you're not rotting out the roots, it'll be relatively happy. Slightly acidic is definitely preferred, and so that's another challenge we can sometimes have in our native soils. Not typically a problem in our containers and our raised beds as much. So between 6 and 7 is the ideal pH. Above that pH, you're going to start running into phosphorus availability issues. So your soil may not be deficient, but the plant won't take it up. So that's can be an issue there. One of the remedies that's not invasive on the soil is just mulching. Always mulching your garden over time. That and minimizing the disturbance of those fungi in the soil. That's going to keep your soil trending neutral or slightly acidic, and going to prevent it from being more basic. So, as far as calculating your seed quantity, you're going to be planting single cloves from a bulb. So typically seed garlic is sold by the pound, and clove count depends on the variety. So it can be tricky sometimes to plan your spacing. But in general, garlic doesn't like to be crowded. So we plant ours at least 6 inches between cloves. So that's our in-row spacing. And then we usually do 12 to 18 inches between row. So that's the space between our rows of cloves. So in our 3-foot-ish raised beds, we do 2 rows. 2 rows of garlic, and then 6 inches between those cloves. Typically, 10 cloves is going to be common, unless you've got a heavy cloved variety. And you can expect, with good fertilization, you can expect a 10-time return. So for 1 pound planted, you should be able to harvest 10 pounds. Also, it's important, especially you talked about getting small cloves. Some of that can be genetic, so sourcing your seed garlic is very important. Often planting grocery store garlic, even if it's organic, may not be your best option. It can work, but sometimes there's inhibitors, and it's better to be getting it from a reliable seed company. So some of our local nurseries will be selling it now. We don't have any seed garlic available. We had a very small quantity at one of our farmers markets. We typically order through Fillery Garlic Farm. However, that's something where we have to get our orders in early midsummer, pre-order, and they our garlic for the garden up here just shipped. So you're not going to be able to find much available online now. It's pretty much too late for this season. However, I think, if I remember correctly, Old Stonehouse may have just gotten some in. I think Rail City Garden Center in Sparks typically has some. I don't know. I don't think Greenhouse Garden Center here in Carson does, but unfortunately, I didn't check in ahead of time. So that's worth a shot. Although I don't think he does that typically. I can't recall for certain. So. And I wondered if Moana did it as well. So, some of our local nurseries have them in stock, but now is certainly the time. So.
Is it in a dried form, or is it soil, or how does it?
You're basically going to get a bulb, bulb or a head of garlic, just like you would from the grocery store. Usually not sprouted. It may be just starting to sprout like it does sometimes in the kitchen, but usually that happens with me after I receive it, between receipt and planting. So no, you're getting a dried bulb, and then you break those individual cloves off, and it's important not to damage the base too much when you're getting the cloves off. There is kind of a plate at the bottom of the head. They do separate off of that kind of plate at the bottom, but you want to be relatively gentle. and you don't want to over peel them in planting. And then, yeah, one of the big things about planting, which I've got a great little diagram on this document that I'll link. Let me pull it up. That's why it's missed. It's very important to plant your garlic upright. So planting that clove as perfectly upright as you can is important because it will grow in that direction initially. It's always going to correct and end up coming above the soil, but if you plant one of your cloves sideways and it's going to start growing out before it curves up, and then when we go to harvest, we don't necessarily know where that is. Because it's going to be several inches away from where it's coming out of the ground, and so it's really easy to miss with your fork. And again, we're going into dry soil, so we have to loosen the soil to pull those out, and we don't want to be stabbing them with our fork. So you want to make sure you're planting straight. One of our local garlic experts, he actually doesn't allow assistance with planting anymore because he's had some bad volunteer experiences. So that's a good one, a really important one to remember.
Well, are they happiest by themselves? Like I'm thinking container. Can they be with anything else?
So the good question. Are they happiest by themselves? And should they be by themselves in a container? And yeah, the answer is yes. They don't like companions. Keeping the beds well weeded and keeping your garlic weeded is important and usually easy. So we'll talk about mulching heavily. However, we'll refer, and I've got my diagram up now. I had some format where it wasn't showing proper. So that spacing, 5 to 6 inches between your cloves in row, that's how you want to address it in containers as well. So I don't have a good example. Arnold normally brings, one of our garlic experts, he normally brings a smaller tote that's probably a little more appropriate, although one of these black and yellows wouldn't be bad. And he normally, I think the one he has is normally shallower, but 12 to 18 inches of depth. And then something like this, we could take, if we take our lid, and I don't have it measured, but I'm certain that in a container this size, you could do 2 rows of garlic. So you could be planting here and then 5 or 6 inches, give yourself a couple on either side, and so you could be planting 8 or 10 cloves into a container like this, 6 to 10 maybe, and then be turning around and coming out with 6 to 10 heads of garlic at the end of the season. And yeah, that's a great option. It's easy to control and cut your water. We'll talk about cutting the water and drying it off at the end. That's a kind of a funky challenge I ran into growing them in the raised beds and not growing them the entire length of the raised beds and having multiple varieties growing side by side. Luckily, my drip lines in there have valves, so I was able to manipulate that a bit. And I was also able to move my entire header past them, past the section where the garlic was growing and continue to water the rest. And also just did some overhead watering on that. So as far as soil preparation goes, if you're going to be growing in containers, some kind of sandy soil or good drainage mix, something with some perlite or vermiculite or even straight sand, about a third that, and then a third compost or well composted manure, and then about a third topsoil or potting mix of some good quality, mixed together well, loosely filled in the container. And then, we want to amend with some kind of high phosphorus fertilizer. We typically use bone meal fish bone meal or rock phosphate. Those are going to be the best sources. And that's the P in your NPK. If you're seeing NPK, if you're looking at, fertilizers, balanced fertilizers are great, but you want something that's relatively high in that middle number. We don't need to be too concerned about high amounts of potassium. That's more for fruit growth and some other things. And a moderate. Jake mentioned fish emulsion. Yeah, that's another great one for all kinds of things. Fish emulsion is relatively high nitrogen, so you want to make sure you're getting the balance there, because that's made of the whole fish, whereas the fish bone meal is, that's going to be, I think it's usually 2 to 4 nitrogen and 10 to 15 phosphorus, and I think it's usually measured 0 potassium. The other important mineral and micronutrient with the garlic is calcium, and that's going to be found in those bone products as well as the rock phosphate. Our native soils are also relatively mineral rich. Often the issues that we have with mineral deficiencies in our native soils, they're more often related to that availability due to pH. Like I mentioned before, one of the most common ones we hear about is blossom end rot on tomatoes, where the bottoms are brown and funky, and everybody's add calcium, crush up eggshells, put them in your soil. Well, yeah, that people swear by that, and I'm one of the ones that says, I don't think that's really doing the trick. There's something else at play there. Those eggshells might help next season's plants, but probably not helping much this season. And consistent watering and adjusting your soil pH, which inconsistent watering is kind of what messes with the soil pH with tomatoes as well, and that calcium uptake. So it's often not that the soil is lacking. There's so many times where something else is going on. But yeah, we want to make sure we get that in the soil for garlic. So planting, clove depth is the other important one, about 4 inches. We don't want to go quite as deep as we do between our cloves, but close. 4 to 6, we've got a little bit of wiggle room there. So, but we go by a 4-inch depth rule, and we use, I forgot to check in with Arnold and ask him. I can't remember how he does his holes. Holy smokes, where's my bulb planter? Oh no, it's on the back of the shed. So I'll show you. Let me grab it right now. Real quick, sorry.
I wonder if I could use the soil that's by the river, which is kind of like this stuff in the sand. Yeah.
So this is a handy dandy bulb planter. Little twist handle at the top, and yeah, this was a local donation from the Garden Weasel, so little shout out. We got some cool stuff from them. Obviously, if you're doing small amounts, your hand or a trowel is going to work just fine. You can a couple fingers, and you just need to open up a hole 3 or 4 inches deep. A lot of our trowels have the little measurement. Whatever you've used for bulb planting in the past, I like this a lot because we can do a whole bed, and you just plug it in, kind of kick it loose, knock the plug of soil out, and you've got a nice hole. And so you can just do a bunch in a row real fast. Up here, we've done that, had a second person follow, set the cloves, tuck them in. But that's pretty much it. Again, you want to make sure that clove is oriented facing straight up. And I see I missed my note earlier. I said we did 12 to 18. I've got 10 inches between rows for that spacing. So our expert suggests that we can go a little tighter than that. So 10 inch between row, 5 or 6 inch in row spacing between cloves. And then we're going 4 inches deep. And then once we're planted and we know it's oriented right, we cover up that soil, and then we're going to mulch the top. You want to cover your garlic It's great for the soil. It keeps it slightly insulated and moderates that soil temperature. It holds moisture in. It protects that little bit of greenery that may come up in the fall. Protects it a little bit, although it is going to die down, and that's what we want for our fall planting. But we go, 3 to 6 inches thick with the mulch. As far as your mulch material goes, pretty much anything that used to be a plant that's gonna be high carbon. So in composting terms, we say that's one of our browns. Basically dried, non-nutritious plant material. So straw, mixed wood chips, old wood chips are great. Leaves are all right. They're a bit more nutritious, but you want to make sure you don't get a compaction layer, that's going to stick together and prevent water from infiltrating. And that's the one thing that I can see happening with leaves often. So if you're going to use leaves, I'd recommend still mixing with some straw or with some wood chips. Mixed material is great. And then I'd say the denser it is, that's when you'd go a little thinner. So if you're using wood chips, go closer to that 3 inches. If you're just using something looser like straw, go closer to that 6 inches. And here with our winds, it can be challenging to keep in place. So a lot of folks use like snow fencing, or wire mesh fencing kind of materials just laid over the top. You typically don't have to stake it significantly or do any significant anchoring to do that. But also, especially in raised beds, if you've got a little lip in your bed, wetting it down at the point of application does wonders and can prevent a lot of that movement if you just do a thorough wetting in the first place. Say again? Exactly. It's a challenge. We have that all over here, although it does a pretty good job of staying in the beds. It'll bunch up on one side sometimes and we'll respread it out. But that's, just a challenge we deal with. Often we also use our floating row cover or frost cloth. Agribond is the brand we use. We often use that as kind of a mulch layer. So we'll, or a cover for our mulch. So we'll often lay that down flat over top until things germinate, then bring it up over hoops once things have germinated. With the garlic, you could essentially keep it covered all through the winter. So, because what's going to happen is you're going to plant, and we can plant garlic pretty much as late into the season as the soil is workable. So last season I planted, I think the 2nd week, maybe it was even the 3rd week of December. However, you could start planting now. You could plant now and it would probably be fine. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to get some root growth and the bulb to get, the bulb to get established and get some roots growing before we get totally hard frost frozen. The catch is that we don't want a lot of green growth above the ground before that happens, because then that's wasted energy. It ends up dying. We mostly want that root growth. So if you plant now and we stay really warm through the rest of October and November, which might be the case this season. Our experts anticipating this is probably a late planting year. So, end of the month or through November is probably going to be better this season. But there's a lot of wiggle room. So, but yeah, that's what we're trying to avoid. We're trying to get some growth settle in, but not have a ton that ends up dying down. So we don't want too much. We don't want to do it too early. That's kind of the game we're playing there, but a lot of flexibility. So, and let me see, there is, I'm looking for my dip recipe. One thing I do have that I forgot to mention is if anyone's interested in elephant garlic, it is not a true garlic. If I'm remembering correctly, it is the leek family. And because but it makes sense, because it grows so large, it needs a bit more spacing. So if you're planting elephant garlic, we're looking at 8 to 9 inches apart. So that's what, fully double the amount of space between cloves for the elephant garlic. So, and if you've never had elephant garlic, it's a great one. It's much more mild, and it's just huge cloves. So as far as prep and chopping goes, it's excellent.
Now, since we could have a problem this season getting, what do you call the source bulb? What was it?
The seed garlic. Yeah, seed garlic.
And if I want to just try it, what would be the outcome if I were just to get the store garlic and try it? Would you say it'd be less cloves, the flavor might not be so good?
Well, yeah, it may not grow well. So the question is, since it may be challenging at this time of year to get seed garlic, but you still wanted to experiment, what would be the downsides of using store-bought garlic? Well, conventional is going to be sprayed or, you know, treated with like growth inhibitors or antimicrobials. I think it's usually growth inhibitors that are the issue. And that's with like store-bought potatoes, conventional ones too. Sometimes I think even organic ones, but I'm not super well educated on that. And I know people do have success. So all I'd say is look for good quality and definitely go organic if you're going to go that route. But check the nurseries first, certainly, or call around. So if you can't find it, I'd certainly go. And, you know, that being said, I have had some good success growing organic store-bought potatoes. Some of them may not have even been organic, but they started growing, so I planted them, right? And they turned out all right. That was home garden a few years ago, so not well documented. So it certainly can work, and yeah, I wouldn't not do it if you can't find seed garlic. It's certainly worth a shot. I think just inhibited growth, which, yeah, would bring down your yield, or just wouldn't sprout well, would be the only issue. But if it sprouts and starts growing, that's all it takes.
Are there any varieties that are here or hard or soft neck?
Yeah, so soft neck and hard neck can be grown here, and oh my gosh, I'll have to pull up my varieties. There's a couple, there's several types within each of those families as well. So, and the difference is that one produces the scapes, which is like a flowering stalk, and the other does not. And with scape producers, you need to harvest that when you see it relatively quick. It's a big curlicue stem that comes out of the plant, and I think you want it before it makes a full, complete circle rotation. Otherwise, it's going to be stealing energy from your bulb, and your bulbs will be smaller. Totally. The other benefit is that the scapes are edible, and a lot of people love them. They're a nice little seasonal treat. You know, they can be treated like garlicky green beans. You know, I think people pickle them, stir fry them, all kinds of fun stuff like that. So, right. So that I don't know the answer to. The question was that in these scapes that produced seeds, can those be planted? And I don't know. Did they look like onion seeds? Were they actual seeds, or were they little bulb kind of thing? Oh, and see, I don't know. So I don't know. And that maybe, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, I think you can, but it may take you a whole extra year.
Yeah.
Something to that effect. And I think that's the same with onions. You know, I think if you grow them from seed, you may need a whole extra portion of the season as opposed to doing bulbits or starts. But I think there's something funny there. And I don't know if they just wouldn't be true to seed. I don't know if the genetics are stable, because when we're doing bulb to bulb, we're essentially just cloning the plant over and over, I think. I don't think there's any genetic change. I think that's clonal propagation. So That's a good question. I don't know the answer. And Jake, is that you said size is the only downsize you've seen? Are you talking about planting the grocery store garlic? And Liz chimed in. She said Villager Nursery in Truckee also gets seed garlic. So, little bit of a hike for us, but hey, not bad if nobody else has it. So we'll see. Jake said size is the only thing he's come across. I think he's talking about the store bought. We'll see if he chimes back in. Wind's picking up over here. So I'm pulling up. I'll show you the varieties that I picked out, and I can't remember because within softneck and hardneck, there's a whole bunch of other families. There's porcelains and artichokes and turbans and Asiatics. I can't even remember how many different types, and some of them are more difficult. I think the artichokes. I can't remember which the other one is that all of the ones I got belong to. I want to say it's the Asiatics, but I'm not sure. And I think he's told me maybe it's artichokes and porcelains are our best choices. But I think he said to stay away from turbans. They're very difficult, particularly for us. And there's another one he said to stay away from, but I'll give you my little list. And if you go on Fillery Garlic Farm's website, it gives those explanations much better. Fillery, it's Filaree, Fillery Garlic Farm, and I'll type that in here too. I'm sorry I didn't put that in front of me with the types. I should have done that because I know I'm not familiar with them off the top of my head. So that was silly. Let me open that back up. But so now, what we're basically doing is you've planted in the fall. If we've got no moisture, you're going to water it in. You'll need to keep it a little bit moist. You need to provide assuming we get no snow. If we go multiple weeks with no snow, you're going to need to give some water. But if we get some winter precipitation, it can go quite a bit of time without waterings in between because it's so cold. But we may have a warm winter, so don't let it dry out. But be aware of how low wintertime evaporation is, right? And so then we're going to go through the winter, and we're going to see our garlic start to poke up in the spring as the soil warms up. And our garlic expert likes to do overhead watering at this period. So initially, as that's poking up, he likes to actually water the leaves, water over the top, get that drainage going down, and then after several weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, switch to the drip. And then switching to the drip, at that point you stop all of the overhead watering, and the plant will naturally start to yellow. So it'll start naturally yellowing the leaves at the bottom, probably the tips of your leaves too. That's an indicator that very soon you're going to start cutting the water back. And you're going to stop irrigation and cut your water for 2 full weeks, approximately, before harvesting. And what we look for, we're going to be looking at the ratio of green leaves, and this is on the diagram. I've got a great little drawing from Arnold. You're going to be looking at the ratio of green leaves to brown leaves at the bottom. And the one thing to remember is that those first couple leaves that go brown and yellow at the bottom, they may fall off. So your final count, you may have a couple missing leaves at the bottom, just to keep in mind. So it's not an exact science, but we're looking at when we get 5 to 6 green leaves to 5 to 6 brown leaves. And that's about the quantity of leaves you're going to have on the plant. unlikely you're going to have more. And once you start seeing those initial yellowing of the leaves down low, that's when you cut your water. And that's about a 2-week period. So, and you need to be careful. This is where we're lucky, and that's why it's easy here. We almost never get random rains then. You know, if we get a little bit of precipitation, it's usually really insignificant. So it hardly ever hurts us as far as harvest. But it can. Occasionally we'll get a summer thunderstorm that might mess us up there. So so once we decide we're ready to harvest, then what we're going to do, we're going to go back through, like I said, with the garden fork. So this is what we call garden fork or digging fork. Oh, I don't have my camera up. So not a pitchfork. You know, pitchforks, the big wide ones for throwing hay and mulch and stuff like that. But we like using those guys. I suppose you could use a shovel, anything like that, but you're going to go alongside your row of garlic. So, you know, if our row's here, you're going to get 5-6 inches away, dig down nice and deep, and then give a scoop and a lift. And hopefully you're going to be lifting up close or underneath. And while you're doing that, you can actually be tugging the stalk. But you want to be gentle. You don't want to break that stalk when you're harvesting. I think that's going to kind of botch your cure. And so that's something you'd probably have to use that garlic fresh. Or it's certainly, it's very likely not going to store well, at least at that point. So we're going away from our row, trying to make sure we're staying away from those bulbs. That's why we tried to stay planting straight up. And then you're going to pull those out. It's good to be going around whatever your harvest basket or container is. It's good to be going, have a towel or something to shade it, and not do too large of batches that you can't get out of the sun. We don't want to sunburn our garlic. It is not like onions that you leave out in the sun to dry and do their thing first. You want to get your garlic out of the sun and make sure it's covered while you're out in the field harvesting. And then we're going to take it in somewhere to dry and cure. And so with the soft necks, a good way to cure is doing tying it into bundles. Our expert doesn't really like the braiding. It can be all right, but it's mostly a pretty kitchen decoration, and you really don't want to be storing, depending how quickly you go through your garlic. He doesn't necessarily recommend storing in the kitchen. If you want long-term storage, optimum temperature is 50 degrees, and relative, you want humidity, and I didn't list the minimum. It says below 60%, but I think we want to be close to that. And so that's what's hard for us to achieve, is boosting that humidity. We're typically too dry.
Yeah.
So, you know, I don't know if the low threshold, 40-50% humidity, but, you know, he has a dedicated little space, I think with a humidifier, or at least an air conditioner, and he'll sometimes put, you know, just a bucket of water in the closet just to boost that humidity in the little room. But depending how much you're growing, it may not be beyond reason to get a little humidifier, you know, and moderate the climate in a small space. But prior to that, you're going to want to bunch it or braid it, and you want to do that more or less by size. And you want to bundle the sizes together, because your different sizes, the thicker the stalk and the bigger the head, the longer it's going to take to dry and cure. So ideally you have them bundled together by size. And then you're going to be drying it down. Darn it, I don't recall exactly how long that is. I think it's about another 2 weeks, depending on your conditions, you know, how warm your hanging space. Rafters in the garage are good, you know. Hot is okay for that stage. And what you're going to be monitoring, and you can feel a lot of it in the stalk, is you want to feel that moisture going away. So it's just think about, you know, cutting into the onion bulb, you know, that top of the onion where it's going up. we want it to dry down to the dry paper and not have that moist green part in the center anymore. So that's what you're going to be checking, and you're going to be feeling it. And you can feel how much moisture is in there depending on how much give there is as it's going. And then also, once you're getting close and think you're close, you actually cut and check. And so that's where you'd want to probably take a larger one, cut and check, and you know that if there's a tiny bit of moisture left, then your small ones are probably ready, right? And you can gauge how long you need to wait. Alternatively, you could start with a small one, and as soon as small one's ready, get all your small ones out, and then you know that you're still waiting on your big. That's what you're looking for, a complete dry down in the center of the stem there.
I'm a little bit confused. You mentioned first 50 degrees with high humidity, and now you said dry.
You're right. Sorry, I did jump a step there. So
Okay.
that was long-term storage.
Oh,
Those
okay.
parameters with the humidity and that 50 degrees, that's for the long-term storage.
Okay.
Ooh, hey now. Sorry, a little wind blowing here. I see your question, Liz. So Liz asks if we're planting in Tahoe, should we plant before snowpack or spring, and would containers be best? Before snowpack. So I'm talking about late planting, waiting probably into November this year for down in the valley. You're probably golden to plant, now, and especially with this storm coming in, immediately after the storm, if the ground's not frozen or as soon as it thaws again. Well, if you're in containers, get those containers planted and put them outside. Even if we're frosting right now, as you get some thaw and warm days up there, you'll get the growth you want over the next several weeks. So that would absolutely be appropriate. And yeah, not in the spring. I don't know how garlic works if we try spring planting here. I just it's not how we're really supposed to do it. I don't know how it develops or what it would do. I don't know if it over vegetates and doesn't make a bulb, or what happens if we try and do that. So might have to experiment sometime, but it's not like you want to waste the seed garlic, but I did jump a step there. So that was long-term storage. Talking about the humidity and stuff. Immediately after we harvest, we're protecting with towels, protecting from sunburn. Then we're gonna bundle and hang, and that's he uses his garage. I don't think it gets above like 80s into the 90s. I'd be wary about that kind of heat, but it can certainly be warmer than room temperature.
How many bulbs in a cluster?
I think that's a space thing. I don't know. I think typically he's doing 4 or 5. You want good airflow, so you want to have fans moving in there. You don't want them too tight. But I don't have an exact note on that, unfortunately. When I did it, I laid it out on, and I've only grown one season. So I've seen my coworkers and watched, heard our expert do his class, and I had a great season. We had a great yield this year. But yeah, it was my first go round last season. So I didn't bundle and hang. I did it because I was doing it in here. I don't have it here, but I had these plastic trays that are open bottom, and so I kind of laid them out in rows, staggered a little bit, and flipped them a couple times throughout the dry as I was checking. So, and I waited to clean dirt off until after they were dry. I think he does it before hanging at the bundle process. So, toothbrush is a great tool. Just hit those roots, quick trim, bundling up. So, if you're growing in one of these totes, you could probably put the whole tote in a bundle.
Right.
And if you're doing that may be a good way to do it, is just, bundle, for
Using a dehydrator, would that be too quick of a process?
definitely. And that would be something you want to do, this kind of slow dry with the plant material on there. It's part of the cure. It's also part of the curing process. So it affects the flavor. The flavor becomes more intense and more complex to this process. And I think you can run into bitter flavors if you don't. So you'd want to go through this process and then dehydrate if you wanted to. So say you didn't want to store fresh cloves, you can absolutely dehydrate, grind, and make garlic powder. Homemade garlic powder is better than the store, just like everything homemade, homegrown, right? Um,
Is this seeds that you plant? Like, do you use your own garlic to plant next year? Or do
I
you-
didn't. That you absolutely can, but that's where that storage, those storage parameters become important, and it's also that's important to know that the hard neck varieties are generally only going to store 6 months at best. So the soft neck varieties, yeah, no, it's a challenge. I mean, it's like a dedicated closet or space with air conditioner and humidifier to do that. And to do that properly, you probably need, you definitely need a thermometer to monitor it. And you probably would want it on a thermostat and a humidistat control, which sounds complicated, but it's, that stuff is not too expensive nowadays on Amazon. They make these things called Inkbird controllers. I'm actually going through the process of figuring that out to do some nursery stuff up here. But they're plugins where you can set minimum and maximum values, and it'll turn a plug on and off. So you have your humidifier in a plug, and it turns on and off depending on the humidity. Same for a heater or air conditioner on thermostat. So those options are definitely real and available, and not too complicated or expensive now. So. Yeah, and so, yep, we dry down till we've got no wet material. You trim off that top. And again, those layers, paper is part of your storage. So try and keep those paper layers intact and minimize the peeling for anything that's going to go into storage. And then anything you're trying to store for the long term, that's where we're going to be needing to boost our humidity and trying to keep it cool. Cool but not refrigerated, obviously. At 50 degrees, that is certainly a challenging one for us. But I think Arnold, has a closet, or I think he may have framed and drywalled a closet in the garage in a good spot against the house. So, if you're trying to go big with it, the curing room, but also consider what other things like long-term storage at that temperature and humidity. That's straight up root cellar. Warmer than some root cellar material, but I think long-term potato storage, onions, a lot of that stuff's good there. So it's not a terrible idea for some of us that may be gardening big. Storing in mesh bags, something breathable is great. And then the only last note that Arnold has in here is, if some of your bulbs turn out onion-like, as in not dividing into cloves, eat them or use them as seed for next year. So that's interesting, as we would do with all of it, right? Eat it or plant it. So any other questions as I'm going through and seeing if I missed anything? Again, I'll put a link to this on the Facebook. I'll make sure I grab your email, and if anybody else wants me to just email the PDF over. So this info will be available on here. And yeah, I hope those of y'all that may be looking, I'm hoping the nurseries have some stuff in stock. I know I think it was Old Stonehouse. I know I saw a couple posts about garlic seed just coming in, so I know we're not totally out around town, but certainly would be hard to order now. So I think that's all I got. Oh, and I missed at the beginning for calculating the seed quantity. I do have a good number in here. That 1 pound of bulbs will typically equate to about a 25-foot row. So 1 pound of seed garlic, 25-foot row. And that's, obviously because clove size varies so much. There's a lot of variation there, but that's the guideline. So, And yeah, for most of them, we can expect an optimum 10-pound yield for every pound planted. So, and it does say optimum in there, so that's ideal. That's ideal. I've definitely gone that range with potatoes. The first couple seasons were killer, and then last couple seasons were not great. So, got to figure out what's going on. So, but I think that's all I got, folks. So thank y'all for tuning in online. Thank y'all for coming up. I know it got cold on us. I'm glad we didn't get rained on though, because I wasn't quite set up for. Although we probably could have tucked in here. No, we're gonna have to mask up. But yeah, I appreciate seeing y'all up here. My highest hope is that we get more and more folks coming up here for the in-person classes. You know, that shifted away as we were. Oh, perfect. All right, here. That went away with COVID, and we kind of introduced bringing it back, but haven't had much turnout and haven't marketed it too much. So, yeah, just hoping to change that and shift gears. And when we stopped doing the classes in person, we were actually just going to start. Want me to email that to you too?
Yeah.
Cool. We were just on kind of opening up the conversation. I had 8 or 12 regulars that were coming up almost every month. We were kind of spitballing about starting a garden club, and talking about people's specifics and planning some work parties where if someone's got a project they can't do solo, we get a bunch of us, we go over and do it, and do it once a month, and hopefully it's fun, emphasis on both work and party in that sense. So that's kind of what that was evolving to. So yeah, hope to see more and more of y'all up here as we continue these. Thanks a lot.
Are you the bee guy as well?